Exodus 31 as we continue our study in the book of Exodus. Yesterday I was out in my shop and I picked up a grease gun. I don't know if everybody knows what a grease gun is. It's a gun that you use to grease things with. I figure it weighed about a pound and a half. Apparently it was too much. And I tweaked my back, hollered. Son-in-law came running because apparently I sounded like I'd really hurt myself. And I don't suffer in silence. Some of y'all might. I let people know. And so if I just randomly scream this morning, don't think anything of it. I just moved the wrong way. And we'll get through, though. I can't speak for any of you, but statistically speaking, though, most of us struggle with rest. Very frequently, people testify of just living tired. Stress, anxiety persist. I hear stories of people who go on vacation and then they come back from vacation tired. You take a day off from work so that you can work around the house. People struggle to sleep. I've struggled with sleep the majority of my life. I lay down at night and my mind will just go overboard and I can't shut it off and I wind up struggling to sleep. I've been able to, Lord's given me some grace for that in the last year and a half or so. I'm very grateful. I'm sleeping better than I've ever slept in my life, but it's been a lifelong struggle. We struggle with rest. The older I've gotten, I remember when I was young thinking to myself, once I get through this season, then life will slow down. You know, I've got toddlers, and once the toddlers have gotten a little bit older and they can listen to me and they'll obey a little bit better, then maybe life will slow down a little bit. Maybe once they get to the point where they can, drive themselves and I don't have to shuttle them all over the place for things, then life will slow down. I know maybe once they get out of the house and they start their own lives out there, I won't feel so much responsibility and life will slow down. And can I tell you that I'm 55 and it hasn't slowed down yet. Kids have moved out, got grandkids. I've gone through various stages of life and it has not slowed down at all. All I can tell you is that as you grow in life, as you mature, the stuff of life changes. But the stuff is always there. And if you're struggling to rest in your 20s, just know this, it's probably not going to change in your 30s. It's probably not going to change in your 40s. And the only way it will ever really slow down probably is in ways you don't want it to as you get older. I think it makes learning how to rest all that much more important for us. And we're going to talk about rest this morning. And I want you to hear a statement that sounds somewhat counterintuitive at first, but I want you to stay with me. I believe this is an accurate statement, and I think it bears our attention this morning. And it is this: rest takes effort. Sounds counterintuitive. But if you'll give me a few minutes this morning, I'm going to show you what I mean. Rest takes effort, but it's worth the effort. Over the last few weeks, we've been looking at the tabernacle. The tabernacle's that tent that God said to build alongside the tents of all the other people. It was going to be a mobile Sinai that would house the presence of God as they traveled. They thought to the promised land. It was actually going to wind up being something that also traveled with them in their journeys in the desert, but they didn't know about those desert journeys yet. It was just God traveling along with them, a tent beside their tent. And I made this point over and over again as we talked about it. The tabernacle was God's declaration that He wants to be with His people. He wants to be present with us, not distant from His children, close to His children, visible by His children. When Jesus came, one of the names that He was given was Emmanuel. He was God with us. One of the favorite verses I have when it comes to the teaching on disciple making is Mark chapter number 3, verse 14, that says that part of the reason that Jesus called 12 disciples was this, that they might be with Him. He wanted to be with them, and He wanted them to be with Him. And so I've asked this question, what does God want from you? And at least part of the answer to that is very clear and I think somewhat simple. He wants to be with you. He wants to dwell with you. He's gone to great lengths to make that possible. And as we looked at the tabernacle, we saw the incredible attention to detail that was given to it. I think the valuable things in the detail was meant to communicate the great value of God's presence. We shouldn't take it for granted. But I think every aspect of the tabernacle is meant to point us forward beyond just the type and shadow of that tent, so that we might see the substance that the tabernacle was always meant to point us toward, and that substance was Jesus, who was the once-for-all sacrifice that was going to be laid upon the altar for us. Not just to cover our sins, but to wash them away. It was His blood that was ultimately going to be sprinkled on the mercy seat so that the justice of God was fulfilled. It was He who was going to become that basin that would cleanse us and we could wash ourselves in so that we might enter into the presence of God without fear of judgment. He was going to be the light of the world that was always shining. He was going to be the bread of life that was always there available for us. He was going to be that bowl of incense, the intercessor that is always making intercession for us. He was going to be the one that upon His death tore the veil that separated the presence of God from everybody else to protect us from it. But now, since we've been cleansed, the presence of God is rushed out, and now He is with us all. It's good news. The tabernacle was never meant to be an end in itself. It was always supposed to point us towards something better, and that something better was Jesus. And so the big deal that the tabernacle was should make the opening words of this passage we're going to look at in chapter 31 seem somewhat peculiar. We're going to begin this morning in verse 12. Exodus 31, verse 12. It says, "And the Lord said to Moses, you are to speak to the people of Israel and say, above all." Now, you got to hear that. Above all, more important than any of the things I've told you to this point about building the tabernacle. Now we got to make a decision here. What is the all? Is it above all things concerning the tabernacle? At least it's that, but maybe it's describing this even more. Maybe he's saying above all, even most important in what you've heard in the law to this point. Above all could mean the most important thing you can hear from the Ten Commandments. What are they commanded to do above all? Listen, you shall keep my Sabbaths. Now, is that a surprise to you? It's a little bit of a surprise to me. I'll be honest. I think if you're going to say above all, I think I might have put a priority on some other things. You think they've been given very specific things about building this tabernacle, and maybe you might think, the altar might seem more important, or maybe the sprinkling blood on the mercy seat, the atonement might seem more important. You think about the Decalogue, those 10 words that they were given. They were told, you can't have gods other than me, you can't worship idols, don't take my name in vain. Those are pretty big deals. They were told you got to honor your parents. You're not supposed to kill people. You're not supposed to steal. You don't lie. You don't commit adultery. You don't covet what other people have. These are all big deals, but here he's coming to the end of this instruction about the law, and he's making a final statement, and in that final statement, he says, above all, keep the Sabbath. Now, I don't know if you remember, but when we went through the 10 words, the 10 commandments, there was some of them that were in Hebrew very short. No murder. Just blunt, simple, 2 words in Hebrew. No murder. No steal. No lie. No false witness. Just very, very brief statements. But if you look back at that passage in Exodus 20, you'll see that where in other things it just says, don't do this, no steal. When it came to the Sabbath, we got 4 verses that describe that. 4 verses that are meant to emphasize, listen, there are no loopholes here. You can't ask your daughter or your son or your son-in-law or your daughter-in-law, or you can't ask a servant to do things. You're supposed to rest on the Sabbath, honor the Sabbath, keep it holy. You can't get other people to do the work for you. You can't get your animal to do the work for you. You're supposed to rest on the Sabbath. And so where other things were only just, one phrase, we got 4 verses that emphasize this. And then here at the very end, we have this verse that says, above all, keep the Sabbath. Now why? This is the answer that's given here in Exodus 31. It says, keep the Sabbath, or the Sabbaths, for this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I, the Lord, sanctify you. See, there you have it. He says by keeping the Sabbath, it's a sign that is pointing to a greater reality, that you don't sanctify yourself, but it is God who sanctifies you. You don't set yourself apart. It is God who sets you apart. It is God who is your protector and your provider and your deliverer. It's God who meets your needs, who gives watch care over you. It's God who makes you into His people. It is God who's declaring, not just to Moses, but to the whole of Israel and to the whole of His people, I am whatever you have need of. Taking a day to rest is meant to remind you, and I believe everyone around you, that you trust God to take care of the things that concern you. And God says you will rest. You're going to rest even though there's work to be done. You're going to rest even though there are chores that are piling up. You're going to rest even though stuff is begging for your attention. You're going to rest even though you see all the ways that time could be productive. You're going to look outside and you're going to see weeds in the garden. And you're going to say, not today. Today, I'm going to focus on the fact that God is my real source. That my real source is not my own strength. It is not my get up and go. It's not my willingness to work hard. It's not my ability to marshal other people to help me. No, that's not my source. My source is God, nothing else. And I'm going to rest on this day as a testimony to the fact that I'm trusting God above all. Even though there's stuff that needs to be done, today I'm going to rest and declare I trust God to meet my needs. Verse 14 says, you'll keep my Sabbath. You'll keep the Sabbath because it's holy for you. Everyone who profanes it shall be put to death. Whoever does any work on it, that soul shall be cut off from among his people. 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day shall be put to death. 2 times in that passage, it declares that breaking the Sabbath is a death penalty crime. You know, that happened in Numbers 15. There's a story of a man who was out gathering wood on the Sabbath. And some people caught him doing it. They brought that man to Moses, and the entire nation of Israel stoned that man to death to purge the evil from their presence. Now, you might look at that and say, well, that sounds like an overreaction to me. But what you miss if you see that as an overreaction is the fact that God, by making it a death penalty issue, is trying to impress upon us that this Sabbath thing is a big deal. There's something about this Sabbath that is meant to be a big deal to us. The importance of it is supposed to put a little fear and trepidation into us. We're not going to break the Sabbath. We're going to honor this Sabbath because this could be our life if we didn't. Verse 16 says, therefore the people of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, observing the Sabbath throughout their generations as a covenant forever. It's a sign forever between me and the people of Israel that in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. And then in verse 18 it talks about Moses being given two tablets. The Sabbath was a testimony that God was creator, controller, and provider of all things, and the people of Israel were commanded to rest on that seventh day in trusting God to provide for them all the days of their life, not just the 6 that preceded or the 6 that were following. And that should have been good news to a slave who never got a day off. It should have been great news to hear. It's like, you know, I don't really, I see things that need to happen, but we're going to rest today. We're going to take a day and we're going to rest. We're going to trust that God's going to give us enough strength so that 6 days of work is enough. We're going to rest. We're going to worship on this day. We're going to honor this day and treat it holy because God is our source and it's not us redeeming all the time that we can. We're going to trust in Him. It should have been good news, y'all. But like so many good things of God, we have a way of messing it up. The whole point of the Sabbath was to declare that you could do nothing without God. Because of Him, you could rest. So on the Sabbath, we're not going to work. We're not going to cook. We're not going to plant. We're not going to harvest. We're not going to travel. We're not going to carry loads. We're going to rest and we're going to worship. Sabbath meant to be a blessing. Mark chapter 2, verse 27, Jesus even made this declaration that man was not made for the Sabbath, but Sabbath was made for man. It's supposed to be a blessing to us. It's supposed to be a blessing to Israel. But like so many things, men got a hold of it, and through the course of generations, it became a burden because man has a way of messing up God's good things. By the time Jesus came along, listen to this, there were 30 9 categories of things you could not do on the Sabbath that were extra biblical, not stuff you could find in the law of Moses, just stuff that was extra and added to it, where God would say, you can't work. Somebody came along and said, let's be clear what we think work is. They built this wall around the law, the Talmud, the Mishnah. They put this wall around it to the point where the man-made rules that surrounded the law became just as important, if not more important, than the law that was given to Moses itself. And what was meant to be for the rest of the people, that was supposed to remind them that God was for them and provided for them, actually became a burden that they had to carry on the seventh day. Let me give you a few examples. Here's one. They decided that traveling on the Sabbath would constitute no more if you went over 3,000 feet from your home. That would become traveling. However, if you placed food 2,999 feet away from your house, and you traveled to that food, the place that you put the food could be considered your house. And therefore, you could travel another 2,999 feet beyond that. Not making this up, easily documented. They said that if you placed a stick or a rope in the road, that could be considered a doorway. So you could travel 2,999 feet to that, cross the stick, and then get another 3,000 feet. There were regulations about carrying things. They said that if you lift up something in public, you could only set it down in private. And if you picked something up in private, you could only set it down in public. If you tossed an object up into the air, the only way that thing could be caught was by catching it with the opposite hand. And if you caught it with the same hand you pitched it up with, it would be a Sabbath violation. A tailor could not carry a needle because that's what he worked with. A scribe couldn't carry a pen. A student couldn't carry a book. Whatever you used to make a living or whatever was central in your life at that time, you couldn't carry that regardless of how light it was. If you carried ink with you, you could only carry enough ink to make 2 letters. Not like a letter, like 2 letters, A and a B. That's it. Clothes couldn't be examined or shaken out before you put them on because an insect might fall out and be killed in the process, and killing an insect is, of course, always considered work. Is this silly? Bathing was forbidden because you might spill water on the floor, and when you cleaned the floor up, it would be washing the floor. And that's obviously work. You couldn't move a chair because in moving the chair, it might cause there to be a rut in the dirt, and that obviously is plowing. Women were forbidden to look in a mirror on the Sabbath because they might see a white hair and be tempted to pluck it. 39 categories of stuff you cannot do on the Sabbath, and each one of those categories has chapters and verses dedicated to exactly what that looks like. So much so that they took a day of rest and turned it into a day of absolute agony and stress because there was so many rules that had to be obeyed on the day we're supposed to rest. So much so that when Jesus came along, he made a declaration, by the way. He said, "I'm the Lord of the Sabbath," which means that whatever rules there are associated with the Sabbath, he could change them. Lord of the Sabbath means it's my Sabbath. I'll do what I want to with it. And in Luke's Gospel, chapter number 13, he comes across a crippled woman. She had a demonic spirit that had been afflicting her for 18 years and had caused her to be crippled. And Jesus called her out and rebuked the spirit. She was healed immediately from this 18-year infirmity. And everyone should have been overjoyed. However, the religious leaders said, "You should not be doing that on the Sabbath. You should only supernaturally heal people by the very finger of God on the other 6 days." Y'all, we can take the best things that God has and absolutely ruin them. And I'm not just saying that about the Jewish leaders of the day. We all have that in us, because every last one of us is wired to think that we bring something to the table, that God really needs our help, that God really needs our effort, maybe just a little bit somewhere along the way. But if you're not careful, if you don't put the effort forth, you're always going to find a way that you think you need to help God. And what God is declaring by the Sabbath is this: all I want you to do is rest and trust that I'm going to take care of it. And man couldn't handle it. He couldn't handle it. The Sabbath was replaced by a crushing burden of religion. But thank God I've got good news for you today. Because the writer of Hebrews declares very clearly, you can see it in chapter 4, that there is still a Sabbath rest for the people of God. It's not the same as the Sabbath rest of Israel. It's better in every conceivable way. The Israelites were told to take one day of rest that was going to remind them of all that God was doing and will do for them, to celebrate everything that they had. That was good, but God, through Jesus Christ, has done something better, because now there is an eternal rest that you and I can enter into, and that rest is Jesus Christ. Hebrews chapter 4 verse 3 says that all of us who have believed in Him have entered that rest. And once we enter into that rest, we don't need every seventh day to remind us. We're called actually now to live in that rest. It's not saying you rest on one day. He's actually saying you rest every day. But the rest is not the avoidance of work. The rest is in trusting in Jesus, the one who did all of the work for us, the one who took the initiative, the one who called us to life when we were dead in our trespasses and sins, the one who drew us to Himself when we had no inclination or desire to draw ourselves to Him. He drew us to Himself. He took the first step, gave His life so that we might be forgiven. He is the one who set us apart and said, this one is mine, and is sanctifying us. He is the one who paid the price that redeemed us from the slavery of sin, who justified us before the high court of heaven, who keeps us now so that we are safe in Him, who has promised to care for us for the whole of our lives, and has made a promise that one day He will glorify us and bring us to Himself in heaven. He is the one that did all of that. The call on you is not to spend Sunday remembering that. The call on you now is to spend every day remembering that. The reason that the Sabbath was so important is because the day was going to come that day of rest was going to point us to the eternal rest that we would all have in Jesus. So you're called to rest today and every day, not because of anything that you've done, but because of everything that Jesus has done. And the law made a big deal about that rest because it was an outward display of trust in God, because now we're called to put our trust in Jesus. But just like the religious people of Jesus' day, we're all going to be tempted to not rest in Him. We're going to be tempted to trust in something else, in someone else, in ourselves. And in doing so, we'll never find rest. One more verse from Hebrews, chapter number 4, verse 11. This is the important one for today, where the writer of Hebrews says this: let us therefore strive to enter that rest. Remember what I said at the beginning? Rest takes effort, so that no one may fall by the same sort of disobedience. Strive to rest. And here's what that effort looks like, I believe. Here's what that striving looks like. Listen, some of you probably weren't here last week. Kenny gave a great word. In it, he said that one of the real callings on us, if we're going to experience the fullness of the kingdom of heaven as God intends us to do, is we've got to spend some time more focused on God and be wowed by Him than looking around at life and figuring out how are we going to do what we need to do. And if you focus more on the wow, the how will kind of take care of itself. I'm going to tell you something very similar to that today, because there is an effort. He said the effort was paying attention. You pay attention to God rather than circumstances. You pay attention to the bigness and the goodness of your Father rather than the badness of the world around you or the devil. You pay attention to Him and let Him wow you. Well, I'm going to tell you that there is effort that is necessary for rest, but it's effort that's placed in the right direction. Some of you may be here today and you ask the question, how secure is my salvation? I mean, really, how secure is it? How am I saved? How am I going to continue to be saved? How am I ultimately going to be saved? And there is a temptation in every last one of us to think that, yes, it's obviously because Jesus did some of it, or Jesus did most of it, and then we need to do just a little bit. Surely He needs a little bit of our help, right? Surely we have to do just a little bit to earn it, right? I mean, is it really free? Is it really a gift that has no requirements of me attached to it? Is it really given to me not because of something about me? Hear me. It is not of works, so that none of us can ever brag and say, well, it's Jesus, but, I gave this, my 1%, I gave 1%. And I'm telling you, it was a stellar 1%. I think it's probably better than your 1%. My 1% better than your, I've watched your life, your 1%, My 1%, amazing. Anytime you say it's Jesus plus, you say it's Jesus and this, it is inevitable. Whatever your and is going to become more important than Jesus. Denominations form over and. Christians separate themselves over their brand of and. Jesus doesn't need our and. We're not saved by works. We're not saved by our goodness. We're not saved by our pedigree. We came from good people. We were raised right. We're not saved by our ability to obey. We're not saved by anything that rests in our power. We are saved 100%, totally, completely by grace through faith. That is this gift of God by grace through faith in what Jesus did, not by faith in what we do. And so are you saved today? The only way you can be saved is if Jesus did everything that was possible for you to be saved. And if He did, hear me, and He did. Since He did, the calling on you today is not to figure out ways that you can help Him out in saving you. The calling on you today is to strive to enter into rest over the fact that He did everything that was necessary to save you. So how in the world am I going to get to the place where I can believe that? Because the gospel sounds too good to be true. How am I going to believe that that's true? Well, here's one thing you need to do. You need to preach the gospel to yourself. I mean, you argue with yourself sometimes. You need to preach to yourself. You need to declare truth over yourself. You need to say that what Jesus did for me was sufficient. And so preach the gospel to yourself. You need to get around other people who will preach the gospel over you. You need to hear it from the mouths of others. You need to hear other people make the testimony that what Jesus did for you was enough. You can't add anything to it that's of enough value to change the quality of your salvation at all. You need to be around people who are like that. You need to be reminded of it more than just once on Sunday. You need to hear it every single day. Some of you may need to hear it every hour of every day. Because your knee jerk is to pull toward the ditch of works. It's everybody's. It's everybody's inclination to think, I got to add a little something to it. So you need to be reminded so you don't drift back into self-reliance and a works-based mentality. That's how you strive to enter into rest. You don't let worry creep in because you're reminding yourself on the reg that, what Jesus did was enough. And I'm going to rest in that. That's just the stuff concerning your relationship with Him and your salvation. Think about all the other things that you deal with on a daily basis. You got family members that need to be saved, or friends that need to be saved. And listen, I am all for praying. You know what praying is? Praying is an acknowledgement that you can't do it. And so you're asking the one who can. Don't go into the ditch, though, and think, well, I need to pray a lot then. Oh, I need to pray every day, every hour, on the hour. I need to pray for a certain amount of time. I need to pray for, I got to find the right words. I haven't prayed with the right words yet. And so I got to find words. I'll tell you what, I'll go find some of those Puritan prayers and read the Puritan prayers. Maybe that'll do it. I need to find somebody on the internet that's got the right prayer. They'll say, oh, if you pray this prayer over your lost life, don't go into the ditch. Ask God to save them and rest. You say, does that mean I don't do anything? No, not at all. God, in your resting, may say, you need to tell them you need to announce the gospel over them right here. But just know this, that it's not going to, if they get saved, it's not because you really did a good job of announcing the gospel. They're getting saved because I had mercy on them and I called them from light into darkness and I brought their dead spirit back to life so that they could hear good news and respond to it in faith. That's why they're getting saved. You need to rest, not fret, not worry, but rest. Like, Lord, I know you can save them, so save them. And rest in it. We prayed over jobs last week. There are folks who need jobs. That doesn't mean resting when it comes to a job doesn't mean that you don't scour the internet and apply to different positions. There are things that God's going to inspire you to do without question, but here's the deal, okay? When you get that job, it's not because your resume was so awesome. It's not because you decided, I'm not going to go to sleep tonight. I'm going to scour the internet, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to scour the internet on my knees, checking every LinkedIn profile that I can come across and try and find a better job. I. If it happens, it's going to be because He did it. You rest in that. So I've got a financial need. Well, who of you, by worry, can add 1 inch to your height? 1 day to your life? My dad, I remember him mocking my mother when I was younger and looking at her and say, you know, it's obvious with you that worry works because 99.9% of the things you worry about never happen. You're going to fret over it? You're going to ask God to care for it and then trust that He's going to care for it and rest in that. Listen, it takes a lot of effort for me not to worry. It takes effort for me to rest in these things. But I have to remind myself that He who began a good work in me is going to be faithful to bring it to completion. I got to remind myself that He who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills will meet my needs according to His riches and glory. I got to remind myself that He concerns Himself with the things that concern me. He calls me to cast my care upon Him and take up His burden because mine might be heavy, but His is light. To rest. Just know, I don't know if you need wisdom or healing, direction, guidance. I don't have a clue what you need of. But just know this, that He is your I am for this. I was just sitting here earlier and just realizing that sometimes I feel like the potter has made me into something and now I broke it and all I am is a cracked pot. But our potter is able to put that back together. You think you broke your life? You think it's messed up beyond repair? I'm going to tell you, He's good at fixing cracked pots. You can't earn any of that. I think it's good that you ask. We should pray. I think that's good that you declare the truth of the gospel and the truth of the word over your own life and trust in that. Sometimes all you can do is wait, and part of that is not, and hear me, that's not being passive. It means that I am actively trusting in Him, not in myself. And so there are things that I probably need to do. I need to pray. I need to, live my life communing with Him. I need to get up and go to work. I need to, do the good works that He has me to do. These are all good things, and they're all going to help in the situations of life, but not one of them is earning it for you. We need to rest in Him. The rest that God has for us in Jesus Christ. It's not just a Sunday rest, it's an everyday. Let me be very clear about something. Over and over and over again in that passage in Exodus, it says that this was for Israel. The one-day Sabbath that you don't work does not apply to us. Jesus fulfilled that law and made it better. So you say, can I pick up a load and carry it? Let me just say this. In the winter, all of you break the Sabbath. I know it for a fact. Because once your HVAC lights that fire, and it might just be a spark in your electric, but you light that fire on the Sabbath, you broke the Sabbath if we're going to go by the old rules. Ladies, that purse, sorry, it's too late. You already broke it. You already broke it. Did you go more than 3,000? Did you go more than a Sabbath day's journey to get here today? I mean, hear me. We are not called. I think a Sabbath principle is probably a healthy thing. You need to find places to rest from work and let your body and your mind and your spirit rejuvenate. Yes, but that was a type and a shadow that is meant to point us toward the eternal rest that all of us are supposed to sit down in today in Jesus. I remember so clear that there was this guy I went to church with when I was little. And he fussed because people in the church went out to eat on Sunday. And, it's like you're making all these other people work on the Sabbath. That man was mean as a snake. Mean as a snake. But he thought he was superior because he was, keeping the Sabbath. But, I know he ran his heat in the winter too. Hear me, I'm not saying you need to take a day off. I'm telling you, you need to take the rest of your life and rest in Him. That's the call. I hope you can do that today. I hope you grow toward it. Strive to rest.